Hi, this is Lori, and this is part 3 in my series on the Shut the Box game. In this episode, we're going to be taking the Python code that we wrote in part 2 to run the game on our PC and put it into MicroPython with our Pico and our Pico Display Pack 2.0 and create a small handheld version of Shut the Box. Quick overview of the series for Shut the Box. In part 1, we covered the game rules and how to make your own tray to play it in the physical world. And then in part 2, we wrote the Python code so that we could play it on a PC. And as I said in the intro here, we're going to get it on our Pico Display Pack 2.0 using a Raspberry Pi Pico. So real quick, we're going to use the Pico Display 2.0. I just want to quickly say I'm not sponsored by anybody and I'm not trying to sell their product. I happen to like the Pico Display 2.0 and I think it's a very convenient way to package together buttons and a display and to put your Pico on the back. There's a couple other displays that are also available. So I'm using the 2.0. There's a smaller version called Pico Display and a larger version that's just come out recently called 2.8. I think you could make my program work with Pico Display. You'd have to definitely change where everything's placed because it's a much smaller display, but it could be a good challenge. It'd certainly work with this 2.8, and I think unchanged it should work because it's the same number of pixels, 320 by 240. It's just a larger display. And I also think you could do this project with a separate display. It doesn't even have to be color if you don't want to use color. And you need 4 push buttons, so you could definitely do it on a breadboard or a prototyping board to make this game work. But the most important thing would be is that I'm going to use the version of MicroPython for the Pico that includes the Pimoroni libraries, because I'm going to use the Pico graphics library that they've put together and a few of their other components, the RGB LED being one of them, and their buttons. So that's pretty easy to get your hands on either through the Pimoroni site or as you load MicroPython onto your Pico through Thonny, you can choose the version that includes the Pimoroni libraries. All right, I'm going to share my code pretty briefly compared to what I would normally do. Normally, in these kinds of episodes, I go through my code line by line, and there's just such a large amount of code here that I don't think I can really do that. So I'm hoping that if anybody really actually wants to study what I've done, they'll find that the commenting and maybe this little brief overview will help them. I also want to demonstrate how I went about getting this onto the Pico display. And I did it in several steps. And when I start this kind of a project where I'm going to put a game or something onto a very small display like the Pico display, I start by mocking up what the display is going to look like and work with that. And then I work on animating it and making it work in later versions. So you can see I have this mock the display Python program. It's already running. It just, in fact, it's over with. You can see, it just puts the elements onto the display, and you can see here I'm using the Pico graphics from the Pimoroni library. I'm also using their RGB LED and button, not necessarily in this particular program, but I'll be using those. And here's where I tell it I'm using the Display 2.0 and what kind of pin colors do I want to have. And I'm setting up some colors so that I can use them in the program. Then I'm going to create a bunch of functions to put things onto the display. one of the functions that I found I needed to have, which I didn't find in the Pico graphics library, was the ability to do a rectangle outline. I could do a rectangle filled, but I couldn't do an outline of a rectangle, and I needed that for the tiles and for the dice. So I created a function to draw my tiles, put the numbers inside, and I am able to control the number colors, so the color of the numbers and the color of the outside box of the tile. You can see here they're different colors, and so I put a function together to do that. Here I'm setting the title onto the screen, and I'm doing some labeling of the buttons, and then you'll see I had to make a function to do the dice. So you can see I have the dice here on the screen. I'm not very skilled at doing these kinds of graphics, so it took me a while to create my own dice so that I could put any particular number that the dice was rolled to up there, so that it was maybe a little more visually appealing than just putting the numbers that I rolled like we did in the Python program for our PC. And then I have a little more of a message area here below. So this is going to be the up and down buttons to move back and forth on the tiles, because you're going to have a little selector bar underneath, and these buttons will move that selector bar, and then when we press select with this button, it's going to gray out that particular number and let us know that it's already been selected. And then these two buttons will also, this high one here, X, will roll one die, and the next one, in addition to being the selector button, it'll also roll two die. And I thought it'd be nice to have the messages down here so you'll get to know what your roll number is, what the total is of your roll. And as you start selecting, it'll keep a running tab on your total, so you can kind of see when have I matched the total. So just the little helper function will build into this code for the user to know that they've gotten the total matched up. All right, and this title area, I'll also use that as a message area so that the user can know what to do next, because it's a lot going on, and we were able to write to the shell when we wanted to tell the user what to do. Now we'll have to communicate very briefly with the user up here. All right, next up was to figure out how to roll the dice and change the display that we have here. And so I decided just to make a small Python program that would do that. And so you can see I have to import randint. And I started to collect all the functions I needed into this file called stb.py, so shut the box. And I started pulling out those functions like for drawing the dice and for drawing a rectangle, and I started pulling them off and including all of them in stbpy. So you'll see I'm importing that as well. And if you look here on the Pico, you can see that I have that set of functions all put here. All right, so this just goes through and rolls the dice, and you can see it's pretty simple now. When I first started it, I had all the functions in here, and then I started moving them into the stb function file as I got them put together and knew they were working correctly. And so yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We're gonna read the buttons, and so they've got a nice Pimoroni put a nice button read together, and it works pretty well. It doesn't need any interrupts or anything to make it work pretty well, so I really like that. So I've been using those, so I'm just calling button X, and you can see it here. This is the RGB LED. I'm using that from their library, and I'm using this button object from their library too. And these are the pins that those X and Y buttons, for example, are connected to. So let's send this over, and I'm going to bring up my display. So hopefully you'll be able to see. So all it does is say roll 1 or 2. So let's try rolling 2. So I'm just going to press that button, and you can see there, and you can see here's our roll of 6. So let's try pressing 1 and see what happens. And you can see I got a roll of 3, and I can do whichever one I want. And it's pretty responsive and works pretty fast. And you can see I was also flashing the RGB LED just for fun whenever you roll. So, oops, that works pretty well. So just working on, clearing all the display, getting everything working with rolling the dice. And so you can see there's a whole bunch of functions, like one called roll 1 and another one called roll 2 that I put together to roll the dice, clear everything out so that this while true loop here could be pretty simple. Well, next big task was being able to select the tiles that you wanted to use for that roll. And that did take quite a bit of work. So this was just a part of it. So we need to be able to use the 2 buttons over here to select, and we need to also have, to move, I should say, and this one will be used to select. So that's why we have A, B, and Y defined here. And just some labeling. And then you'll see down in here, again, I'm using their read function, which works really well, as I said. And then you can see we're reading that to move a little marker back and forth. And then we're also checking to see if the user has pressed the Y button to see if we need to gray out that tile. So this one doesn't allow you to unselect. The final code does. I decided that people might make a mistake and select the wrong tile that they didn't want, and so it is possible to unselect, and so you have to check for that. So let's run this one. There we go. So now you can see, and actually it's printing to the shell what tile it's under. So I even though this is tile number 1, as we work through the code, this one's considered 0, 1, 2, just like we just like we normally would for Python. Let me just make sure I have this is still in view. Okay, and so here we go. So we can press these, and they're going to move back and forth. There we go. I don't know why it paused there for a minute. I might have went a little too fast. And then we can press select, and we'll gray something out, and maybe we'll move back and gray out another one. So that's how it's going to look on the screen when we select something. And you can kind of see it was keeping a total for us. And I just picked I just picked the roll as 7 just to have some messages down there. That's not really doing too much, but just allowing me to keep track of what are selected, how to get that total, and so forth. All right, so then I finally, after I had these 3 running pretty well and all those functions over here in STB that we would need, I said, well, it's time to start trying to put this whole thing together. All right, it's finally time to see the full and complete code. So first I'll just show what's in the STB file, and let me get back up here to the top. You can see the functions that were written as went along. I ended up making the initial screen startup a function, and then labeling the Y and X buttons, since they do change, and sometimes I want the roll 1 not to appear, so I wanted the ability to take that on and off. Then we'll have a function to put displays here in where the title was, so we can put any kind of message up there. Here's our rectangle function, our dice function. It ended up getting a little bit more clear, bigger I should say, so that we could clear out the dice from the display. Then a tile function to draw our tiles, a roll 1 and roll 2, so this is how we roll the dice and display them. So whether we roll 1 or 2. And then when we need to redisplay the tiles here all together, we'll know which ones are active, and so which ones need to be in pink and which ones need to be in gray. And then here's our famous roll check function. So yeah, a lot of code now in the STB file. Now let's take a look at the shut the box. Important is we're going to be setting up all the buttons to the pins that they're connected to. And then we're going to start our game here. So while true, we're going to set up the start of the game. So this will, after you end one game, there'll be a small delay and the game will start over again. So here's really the loop for gameplay. So very similar to the code that we had before, same kind of structure. We'll blank out the dice that we had on the beginning screen, and we'll check to see if they've won. In other words, they've gotten a shut the box. Is the score 0, then it should stop and tell them they've won. And then we check to see whether they can roll 1 die, or do they have to roll 2. And we'll control what's displayed here, so you can see that when we get to roll 2, we'll need to look at both the Y and X button, and we'll need to listen for those. Otherwise, we'll only listen for the roll 2, and we'll make sure that the X button isn't labeled so the user isn't confused about which button to press. Next, we just need to check to see if they've got any solutions. If not, then the game will be over, and we'll tell them, what their score was. And we'll skip over the selection step, and we'll end the game. Otherwise, it's time to, there is a solution to the roll you've received, and we need to select the tile. So that's what all this code does here, is get things set up for tile selection. And now we need to pay attention to buttons A and B that will move a little marker underneath them back and forth. And then we'll also need to listen to button Y for whether they want to select that tile. And there's a lot of if, elif, and else just to see, have they already selected that tile in this round? So that's the current selection. Then we'll unselect it. But if not, we'll also look to see if that tile is not available, like it's previously been selected. Then we'll tell them, no, you can't do that. So if that's not available to you at that point, and then otherwise we'll accept your selection. And then this was a decision I made, but as soon as the sum of your current choices equals the roll total, you jump down to this piece of code, it sleeps for a second, and it accepts your roll. So if you're just changing what you wanted to sum, and both things you might have wanted to do were correct, the first one you select is the one that's going to get chosen, and then they'll be removed, and we'll come back up to start the rolls again. So I decided to do that. I think you could have had another button involved and said, I'm finished with my roll. You could have done something like that as well. But as you can see, it's already getting a little hefty in terms of the amount of code it takes to kind of run this interface. All right, let's run it. Let me check my display. Okay, so we have about 5 seconds before it goes. So Yep, so now it's telling us that we need to roll 2 in the message. And so our only label over here is that we can roll 2. So we'll go ahead and roll. And you can see our roll is 9. And now it tells us we should select tiles. And now notice the labels have all changed. So it does say select instead of roll. So with 9, I would come back this way and I would press select. And it says 9 is selected. And you notice that it advanced. So it went back to the next, to do the next roll. And we still need to roll 2. It's not an option. So let's roll 2. And our roll is 3. So I think I'll take the 3 and select that. And it accepted that. We still have to roll 2. All right, so we have a 6. Now we could pick a 6, but maybe we're first thinking we're going to take the 2 and 4. So let's say I'll select the 2. And then I realize that, no, I want to go ahead and select 6 instead. I can unselect it and then move over to the 6 and select that. Still have to roll 2. All right, we got a 9. So I'm going to select the 1. I'm going to go back this way and select the 8. And still have to roll 2 because we got a 7 in there. So let's see if we can get rid of that. So we got a 6. And the only way we can make the 6 is with 2 and the 4. So let's do that. So we still have to roll 2. And we rolled a 6. And so there was no play available. And that was our score. And the game starts back over again. So that's what I ended up putting together. I'm pleased with how it works. It was a little harder than I thought, and I'm sure it's not the most efficient way to do this, but I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed putting this together and trying to come up with a way of taking user input just from buttons rather than from the shell. So it was a fun project, and I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, I want to thank you for watching.